This segment for the lecture is about watchdogs. I brought an example of a watchdog here. This is Jasmine. You can tell that she's very conscientious and that when anybody knocks on the door, she's always barking for a very long time to make sure that we spend special care in supervising whatever it is that's going on. Well, that's what members of Congress and that's what the president want too, is a watchdog to make sure that agencies are towing the line or at least doing the things that they want them to do. You might think that agencies, because they're within the executive branch, just do whatever it is that the president wants. But that hasn't historically been the case. In fact, as recently, well, I guess, in the early 20th century, mid 20th century, you had presidents like Eisenhower and even Lyndon Johnson saying that they didn't know how to control their own agencies and that the directors of their agencies would promulgate rules and do things that they actually weren't comfortable with. And so we became to have almost a situation where you might call it a plural executive, where you had the president and you also had other secretaries and administrators or directors who were doing other things within the executive branch of government. That's good if you're somebody who's concerned about concentrations of power. It's bad if you're someone who's concerned about getting things done in an efficient way. And administrative law is often this balance between um, deconcentrating or decentralizing power and creating efficiency at the same. Well, let me explain a couple of things then about watchdogging from the White House. Presidents really didn't get a handle on how to watchdog agencies until President Nixon. Nixon had the first idea about creating some office within the White House that would actually be responsible for supervising all of the rules that all of the agencies had. Reagan took this farther, and Reagan really is, if you want to think of it this way, the genius behind executive control of agencies. He established certain offices within the White House to supervise what it is that agencies do. One of these offices, which he made use of, and which all presidents have made use of since, is called the Office of Management and Budget. The Office of Management and Budget is a very powerful office within the White House. And because of an executive order by Ronald Reagan that was redesigned by President Clinton, all agencies that propose rules have to propose rules and send them to the Office of Management and Budget. So it becomes a bottleneck, if you will, through which all of these rules have to flow. They all have to go beneath the eyes of somebody the president trusts at the Office of Management and Budget. And then the Office of Management and Budget will look at these rules according to certain standards that the president has created. And then the Office of Management and Budget can say, well, we think these rules make sense and we're all for it. Or they can send the rules back to the agencies and say, we want you to redo it or think about this other issue which you haven't been thinking about. And as a result, presidents have a much stronger way of controlling what it is their agencies do. Now, Ronald Reagan, as you know, was not a fan of regulations at all. In fact, he was elected twice on platforms of relieving business from lots of what he saw as unnecessary regulations. And so he used the power of the Office of Management and Budget mainly to screen out all kinds of regulations. And he created a cost-benefit analysis formula by which all regulations had to be evaluated. And so literally every rule that came through Office of Management and Budget had to go through this cost-benefit analysis. And if it looked like the costs of having the regulation were higher than the benefits, it would be thrown out or sent back to the agencies with a very strong recommendation that they think about doing something else. As you might imagine, this became a problem for people who liked regulation because often, as we've discussed before, it's hard to show all the benefits in monetary terms of many regulations, especially health benefits. So you have a health benefit that keeps kids from going to emergency rooms because of asthma, or that keeps lead out of their blood so they don't have decreasing IQ points. How do you evaluate or value in monetary terms the benefit of that? Often these didn't have benefits attached to them at all in monetary terms, or you ended up saying, well, I'll decide that an IQ point is worth $1,000, and then we'll put it into the hopper and see if it justifies itself. So that became a problem, and we'll talk more about that. But the Reagan administration and the first Bush administration used OMB, I think it's fair to say, primarily as a way of limiting the number of regulations that came out. And so many people who were in favor of protections and safety and environment weren't happy about this bottleneck that had been created. When Clinton came into office, he continued to use OMB, but he used it more as a way of directing agencies toward the regulations that he thought were most politically advantageous to him, and perhaps most advantageous to the public as well. And so he actually used this system as a way of directing where agencies would spend their time and their resources. And he even prompted, in some cases, agencies to think harder about regulations that actually might make people better off. And so Clinton was actually pretty innovative too, like Ronald Reagan, only by using his power to create more regulations in the areas that he cared about. He also did something that no other president that I know of did before, and that is he took credit personally for many of the proposals and rules that came out of the agencies, by saying, look, here's something that the EPA did, here's something that the FDA did. I want credit for that as your president, because I'm the one who's helped manage the process of getting these regulations through. And that became actually a new kind of strategy. Presidents hadn't really done that before, tried to get credit in a very blanket way for the things that all of their agencies had been doing. When George W. Bush came into office, he returned, I think it's safe to say, to the Reagan model, and in fact intensified it. So now there are many more hoops to jump through to create regulations. Just a few of the things, and I'll look at them again here, that you've seen in your reading, is presidents can issue executive orders. And executive orders are orders to their agencies, requiring agencies to do things. And so when Reagan said that all agencies had to send their proposals to OMB, he did that through an executive order mandating that. And when Reagan and Clinton said that agencies have to apply cost-benefit analysis to their rules, they did that through an executive order too. There are other kinds of executive orders. There's an executive order also on environmental justice that Clinton put through, and you see that in your reading, which is an order that says that all agencies have to think about the distributional burdens on income level and on minorities when they pass rules that have effects on the environment. And there are also executive rules that have to do with federalism. Reagan put one in, and it's still in effect, which says that all agencies have to think about states' rights, and that they shouldn't take more power from states than they have to. Because there's a value of states' rights and federalism. And that executive order is still maintained as well. Presidents also have other ways of watchdogging organizations. They control the budgets, and so if an agency is doing something that the president doesn't like, the president can restrict the budget. The president can also, of course, appoint the heads of agencies and of departments. And the president can remove the heads of agencies and departments. But that removal part is often very politically risky, and so presidents don't usually try to remove people unless there really is a very deep problem.